Happy 4th of July, everybody, and welcome back to our YouTube channel here. We have just started a new series talking about two different kings in the Bible who were both called by God, but they ended up having very different stories. And so we've been recently just talking about the first king, who actually hasn't quite been chosen yet, but we talked about the prophet Samuel and what his role was, and that he was supposed to be the voice of God speaking to the people and reminding them of what God would have them do and things like that. And so we talked about that first because Samuel actually plays a really crucial role in what happens next in this story. And so we are going to talk about how Samuel actually has such a key role in choosing this first king.
Yeah, so what happens is that there is this guy named Saul, and he's actually a Benjamite, and the Benjamite were, from the smallest tribe of Israel, and they were known, throughout the Bible as these very passionate people. Now, Saul was actually looking with a servant for some donkeys that his father, had lost. They looked all over the place, and then what happens is that the servant then says to Saul, well, you know what? I heard that in this area there is this guy who knows about God and who can see things where they might be lost. And so then this happens to be Samuel. So then they said, okay, let's go to this person. Let's even pay him in order to see if we can find these donkeys no matter where they are. What they didn't know was that really God was leading them to Samuel and then speaking to Samuel so that Samuel would then see that Saul was going to be the king that the people wanted, not necessarily what would be the king that they needed, since in the beginning from this whole story, God wanted to be their king, the one who ruled over them. But now the people asking for a king, they were now going to have Saul as their king. So when they find this person, one way or another, then Samuel actually comes and says, you know what? You are going to be king. That God has chosen you to be king of these people. So this is what's going to happen. You're going to find the donkeys. I'm going to tell you where they are. And then after some time is going to pass, I am now going to go in front of the people and say, here is your king now. And I want you to appear there and say, hi, I am your guys' new king. Okay, so, things happen. Samuel had, using his gift of prophecy and what God had indicated, had led Saul to the right place and knew, in fact, the donkeys were going to be found. And it wasn't going to necessarily be a huge track for Saul in order to be able to find them. But so the time passes, and then Samuel comes in front of the people and says, you guys asked for a king? Well, here he is. And Saul doesn't appear. And the thing is that at the moment that Saul was talking to Samuel, he was already saying at that moment things like, oh, well, I'm a Benjamite. That's the smallest tribe. Why would I be the king of Israel? I am in the smallest clan. Why would I ever be the king of Israel? And honestly, that is sometimes the way that we see when God calls us. It's like, well, but I'm not that important. I'm not that great. I'm maybe not that smart, or I don't see myself that way. But God sees people differently and will choose whoever he wants to choose in order to do wonderful and great things. So it's already a bit troubling when a person who has been chosen by God to do and fulfill what is something as great as being a king is already backing away from him. So in the moment that Samuel is trying to introduce him, he's nowhere to be around. In fact, Samuel orders people to go looking for him, and they find him, and they take him out from is his hiding place. And then people saw him like, oh, wow, he's actually a pretty tall guy. And, he looked like the person that could be a king. So then Samuel declares, okay, this is the king now. But given everything that happened about how he was, shying away from this whole situation, there weren't people that actually trusted him of being the king. And, at the moment after this whole declaration, he actually just goes back home and there's people who end up following him, but there isn't really clear indication that he is their king. So what ends up happening is that there is this place of Jabesh, and they are a part of the Israelites. And this outsiders come and they say, you know what, let's make a treaty. The Jabesh people say, let's make a treaty. You guys are pretty tough, pretty dangerous. We don't want to deal with you guys. Just please leave us alone, and we'll leave you guys alone. But this outside people were like, no, you know what? If you want to build a treaty with us, gouge out your right eye of every of the men, because we just want to mess you guys up so that you will never be able to attack us. And this was a very terrible situation already set in place. So then Jabesh, the people in Jabesh said, okay, give us some time to see if, we can find any help. And because this is pretty steep price that you're asking for. So they end up sending this message to the people around them being like, help us. Is there anyone to help us? And this is where Saul hears about what's happening, about the people who are about to, end up having to gouge out their own eyes in this moment. And so Saul, is then, that is where God touches Saul and brings his spirit over Saul and moves him in an amazing and wonderful way so that he rises to the occasion and inspires his own people to defend the people of Jabesh, and to defeat those outsiders and take them away so that this terrible thing wouldn't come upon this own land. And this is another moment in which you see it doesn't really matter who you are, because God can take you and make you a leader, can take you and make you the person that needs to be there to save others. So at that moment is when people realize, okay, actually this person can be our king. But it's not just about, can you have the attributes of the king? There's a lot more to that Samuel then wanted to then highlight.
So then it kind of gets to the point, well, because we already knew Samuel was pretty old by this point, because people had already been worried about, what are we going to do when Samuel dies? And so Samuel's already pretty old. And so then he kind of makes a speech, kind of like before he dies, but it still takes a long time before he actually dies. So kind of like his last words, but he's not quite dead yet. And so he kind of comes up in front of the people and walks up to them and says, all right, you guys have your king now. I've done everything you've asked for. I've stood in the place before you and God and made sure that you knew what God wanted and told God what you wanted. So is there any of you that I have oppressed? Is there anything that I've taken from you guys? Is there anybody that I've cheated or stole from? Testify against me. Call me out on it. If I've done anything wrong, tell me now. And everybody kind of stood back and were like, no, we're good. Which is a really bold thing, because I don't know of many leaders that could stand up and just say, hey, if I've offended you, if I've done anything wrong, call me out on it now in front of everybody. Because I couldn't even do that. I would be afraid that somebody would accuse me of something that I had or even hadn't done. But all the people of Israel recognized that Samuel had done well. And they were like, no, you've done very, very good. And so Samuel reminds them again. He goes, okay, you have your king. But remember, he's not supposed to replace the king who is God, who is supposed to be your king. Now, Saul is here, but he's not here to replace God. And I want you to remember that. And he kind of tries to remind them of this and the power of God by in this time right now that they're in. They don't have storms very often. It's like never. It's like only during another season of the year. And so Samuel kind of calls upon God, and this storm happens with like lightning and thunder and everything. And the people were absolutely terrified because this was clearly God, and because there were no storms anywhere else during this time. And so they all kind of like fell down, and they were like, we've sinned against God by asking for a king when God is supposed to be our king. And Samuel does this really cool thing, just kind of reminding them once again. He goes, God is still going to love you, even though you've asked for a king. He's still going to be with you. He's still your God. You are still his people. But you have to remember that you are going to serve God. Remember all that he has done for you in the past, and remember that he is your king above all else. And then Samuel basically says, all right, peace out. You're on your own now. And so that's kind of where we living the story is at the moment. So Israel finally got their king. They got their wish for having a king, and it's somebody that they can get behind because Saul goes ahead and wins some really great battles and stuff, and they absolutely loved him because this is the king that they wanted this whole time. But things go sour pretty quickly, and we'll talk about that next week. So we'll see you then.
See ya.